So 7.4, we are beginning to get away from the foiling and the multiplying that we looked at the last couple sections. This is going to be the start of the second half, really, of the chapter. The rest of the chapter is all about the same idea, which is called factoring. What are factors of a number? If I ask you to find the factors of 50 or something like that, what do I mean by factors of this? Yeah, two things that we can multiply together to get that number, right? So factors are what you can multiply together to get that number. So the majority of the rest of this chapter, really the rest of the factors, if you look at the poster up there, from 7.4 on through 7.8, the word factor shows up in every single one. Okay. Now we're going to deal with factoring in part 2 of 7.4. So today we're not necessarily using that factoring, but we're kind of getting us ready for that. So that's the big idea of where we're headed, is this factoring of polynomials. Okay. Today what we're using is called the zero product property. Okay, zero product property. So the zero product property, once we get going on it, becomes a very quick and easy thing to do. Okay, we just have to understand why we're doing what we're doing first. Let's say that I have two things multiplied together, and those two things multiplied together equals 0. Tell the person next to you, what can we say for sure about those numbers? Okay, raise your hand. What do we know for sure about these, Riley? One has to be 0. Could both be 0? Sure. Does it matter which one is 0? No, just one of them has to be 0, right? One of them has to be 0. Okay. So that's the idea behind zero product properties. If you're going to multiply two things or more, or three things together to equal 0, one of them has to be 0. Doesn't matter what the other one equals, as long as one of them is 0. Then the whole thing's going to be 0. Okay. So that's the general idea behind this. And what we're going to see is maybe something like that. X times x plus 2 is equal to 0. Well, we know, like we just said, either this has to be 0 or this has to be 0. How many different answers to this problem are there going to be? There's going to be two different answers. Raise your hand, give me one of those answers. One of the answers here. Ava? Negative 2. Because if x is a negative 2, then this is going to equal 0. And that would be negative 2 times 0 is 0. So negative 2 is going to be one of our answers. Okay, what's the other answer going to be? Okay, 0. If this is 0, obviously it equals 0 because it's 0 times 2 is 0. So we're going to have more than one answer today. Okay, we're going to have more than one answer. So our two answers to this problem, x is 0, x is negative 2. Those are our two answers. Okay. First, actually, what are my answers here? Raise your hand, tell me what are my answers to this? What's x gonna be? Levi? 5 and -7. 5 and -7, because either one of those is gonna make it equal 0. Okay. Good. So let's say that, I mean, for most of these, you just looked at it and you can kind of look and say, all right, this is the value that makes that equal 0. Let's say that we had something maybe a little bit harder in this. Let's say that we had, oh, I don't know, 7x minus 28 times 5x plus 27.5. All right, something slightly harder. Other than just looking at it and trying to figure it out in your head and guess and check. Talk person next to you, how could I for sure algebraically find these answers? All right, so the question was not what are the answers, okay? That's not what I asked. The question was, how can we figure it out without just looking and guessing and checking? How could I algebraically, right, like showing work or whatever, how could I figure out exactly what those answers are? What could I do? Both?
You divide like -28 by 7.
Okay, if I divide -28 by 7, I'm going to get a -4. Is -4 the answer? No. So we got to do something slightly different. You're on a track, right? But something slightly different. We cannot just divide that -28 by 7. Yep.
You set up a problem that 7x minus 28 equals 0.
Perfect. Yeah, we said zero product property. One of those has to equal 0. So if you can't just look at it and do it in your head, then take that, what's in the parentheses, and set it equal to 0. Right? Make it equal 0. Take this and make it equal 0. You're going to come across problems that you can't just look at and solve in your head. You're going to see decimals. You're going to see fractions maybe. Right? Your answers aren't always going to be whole numbers. You need to know that we can take what's in the parentheses or what's being multiplied and set it equal to 0. And then solve it out if we need to. Most of them, you're going to be able to look at and just get. Okay? But there are going to be some where it's not as straightforward. You need to know you can set it equal to 0 and solve that equation. Okay? So if we do that, instead of just dividing by that -28, what we're really doing is we're adding that 28 over and then dividing the positive 28 by the 7 to get that 4. Now again, most of you probably looked at that and said, yeah, x is 4. Great. If that's you, awesome. If it's not, completely fine. It might take you an extra 30 seconds, if that, to just write it out, find it. You can do the same thing with the other one. Right? Subtract 27.5. That gives me 5x is equal to -27.5. If we need to, we use our calculator and we get our answer. What is our answer for that one? Take -5.5. So we've got our two answers. Be careful of on big ideas. Sometimes they ask you to write them, the answers from in order from smallest to greatest. Okay. So if it doesn't accept your answer and you're like, that's right, what did I do wrong? Just double check the instructions, right? It might tell you to go from smallest to greatest. Okay, any questions right now on zero product property? All right, explain to the person next to you what zero product property is. Turns out we're only doing the first two examples today. Don't want to overstretch what we're doing. All right. Let me give you a couple more. See what we think here. Okay, why don't you go ahead and solve those two. Figure into this fraction, please. Okay, it's a whole lot easier. Hey, talk to somebody about it. See if they got the same thing. Or if you're stuck, talk to somebody, figure it out. Take that. All right, hey, here we go. Here we go. Raise your hand, tell me what did you get for this first one? What'd you get on the left here? Ava? Say it again. 1 1/3. Not 1 1/3. 1 2/3 for that. Okay, what do we get for the other one? Ethan?
Negative 1 3/5.
1 3/5. Okay. If you want to, you can leave those as negative 5/3 and negative 8/5. Completely okay. Okay. Improper fraction is completely okay unless I specifically say otherwise. Wolf takes it, Big Ideas takes it. We use improper fractions a lot, so it's okay to have it here a little bit quicker. Okay, we're gonna come back to that one. We're gonna talk about this one again, but how about for our second one? What do we get for answers in this second one here? Faith?
2, -4, and 10.
There you go. So we've got 3 answers now. If we're multiplying 3 things together to equal 0, then you got 3 opportunities, 3 different places that could equal 0. And as long as one of these 3 equals 0, the whole thing's gonna equal 0. Right? So you got your 3 answers there. All right. Good deal. So let's come back to this. Okay. How can I look at a problem like this and jump directly to here? How can I look at this and get this automatically? How?
So there's a 5 and a 3, and then it goes to 5/3.
Okay. Yeah, so you got a 5 and a 3, you got 5/3 for sure. So those numbers are right there. Okay, take.
And like, 3 x 5, you just put the sign to the non-variable and then divide, like, 5, divide by 3.
Yeah, so if you flip the sign, right, you change the sign of the constant. Remember, constant's the one without variable. So if you flip the sign of the constant and then divide by the coefficient, that's going to give it to you every single time. Every single time. Change the sign, divide. Okay, because really what you're doing for that 3x plus 5, changing the sign is us subtracting 5. Is us getting it to the other side. That's changing the sign from a positive to a negative is what we're doing when we're subtracting it over. Then we're just dividing by that 3. Okay, so that's something that we can do in our head if we see it, if we recognize it. So change the sign, divide. Change the sign, divide. And that's going to get you that improper fraction sometimes. And again, that's completely fine. But those problems that don't come out as full numbers, we can do those pretty quickly as well. Okay. Okay, questions on those? Okay. 2 more. Then we'll see where we're at. So a couple things here that look slightly different, right? We haven't necessarily seen anything like these. So I want you to talk to somebody about it. What do you think's going on here? What can we do to solve these problems? All right, here we go. Let's talk about it. A little bit of confusion. It sounds like things are slightly different here. What do we think's going on in this first one? What do we think we get for answers in the first one here? Take,
Negative 8 is 0.
yeah, -8, because that's this one, right? We know that x is gonna be -8. And then here, if this is gonna equal 0, then x just has to be 0. So we have x is 0 and x is -8 is our two answers. Okay, it doesn't matter that there's a coefficient there. That coefficient is gonna change anything. For that to equal 0, right? If this x is 0, that's 3 times 0 is 0, and 0 times whatever is 0. That's 0, x is -8. Okay. Anytime, this is gonna be true, anytime you have a monomial out there, anytime you have a term out there with no addition or subtraction, that means x is gonna equal 0. All right, if there's no addition or subtraction, x is gonna equal 0 for that term. All right, how about our second one here? Correspondence 1 squared is equal to 0. Ethan?
1/4.
It's just gonna be 1/4. There's only one answer to this one. Because if this whole thing's gonna equal 0, this has to be 0. The only way that it's gonna equal 0 is if it's 0 squared. And so for that to equal 0, remember it's take this sign and change it. So it's a +1 divided by the coefficient. So 1/4 would be our answer. And if we need to, right, if we need to, then write it out and solve. But we get one answer there. So you could have one answer. We saw an example before where there were 3 answers, 2 answers, right? You could have any number of different number of solutions here, depending on the setup of the situation. Yeah.
We just get rid of the exponent.
Yeah, the exponent isn't going to change anything because if we think about what this means, and we talked about it yesterday, it just means this, right? And then the answers for both of these are going to be the same, so there's only one. Yeah. Okay, any questions about our zero product property? That's all we